What's going on YouTube? It's Tom here, and I'm back with another video. Today's video is going to be a little bit different. I have two excellent knives sitting here in front of me. You guys probably recognize both of them because both are pretty prominent knives in the higher end knife community. We have a Chris Reeve large Sebenza 21, and we have a Chris Reeve large Inkosi. Both are in the single blade shape. And basically what we're going to be doing today is talking about the differences between the two, because there are a lot of differences, even though they look very similar. Before we get into the video, I want to let you guys know that I do have a podcast with Super Steel Steve, Outpost 76, and Alex from Alex_Knifebox on Instagram. We do that every single week. We have a Facebook group. You can look us up, Sharp Talk, on Facebook. If you guys search Sharp Talk on Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, Castbox, and Podbean, we're on all of those sites as well. So give it a listen if you guys enjoy, knife-related stuff, because I'm sure you guys will enjoy the podcast. Anyhow, let's get straight into this video. So we're going to go over a little bit of the cosmetic differences, as well as some of the functional ones, and then we'll get into the internals as well. So first off, the Sebenza has a single thumb lug, as you guys can see right here. That's one of the traits of the Sebenza. No lug here on the back side. Whereas the Inkosi has two thumb lugs. So easy for left and right handers to use. The jimping is also different on both. The Sebenza has your very typical fine jimping. I'm not sure how well that's going to focus for you. Your very typical fine jimping with chamfering on either side. And the Inkosi is a bit different. The jimping is a little bit more spread out. You have one big section right here, and then it's followed by two or three smaller ones, and then a big one, and then followed by two or three smaller ones. It's just a little bit different. It actually adds a little bit of extra traction. The Inkosi also has a floating stop pin as opposed to the Sebenza's fixed stop pin. So the Sebenza is screwed on both sides, whereas the Inkosi is screwed on the back side, but it's floating here on the front side. Stop pin size, I thought was a little bit different, but now looking at both, they're just about the same. The difference between the two, though, is that this stop pin, I believe, is just a sleeve that goes over the screws, whereas this is one solid stop pin. The thumb ramp is also a little bit different. You guys can kind of see that. The Sebenza is pretty much just a really gradual ramp, almost flat, whereas the Inkosi has a little bit more of a rounded ramp to it. The construction of both is a little bit different as well. The Sebenza uses three screws, your pivot, your stop pin screw, and then the back spacer screw back here. And the Inkosi just has the two screws. You have your pivot, which is quite a bit larger than the Sebenza's pivot screw, as well as the the little lanyard / back spacer back here. And then the stop pin's floating. It does have a screw, like I said, on the back side though. So technically, to disassemble, this is only a 2-screw knife. The main difference you guys can see is the difference in the handles. The Inkosi has the finger grooves, whereas the Sebenza just has the single cutout to access the lock bar. The cutout on the Sebenza is also a touch deeper, so it's actually easier to disengage the lock bar. That's one thing I do like on the Sebenza more than the Inkosi. It has this nice little cutout, as well as this chamfering right down here on the lock bar that makes it a little bit easier to use. Whereas the Inkosi, it has that chamfering on the back, so it's better in hand. But when you go to push on the lock bar to disengage the lock, that is a sharper edge, and it does kind of wear on your thumb a little bit quicker than the Sebenza does. Another difference is the dip in the blade after the jimping. So if you look right here, you basically transition from jimping all the way to just straight to the rounded spine. Whereas on the Inkosi, you have your jimping, a flat portion, this little dip in the blade, and then you transition to the rounded spine. I think I've read that Chris Reeve's reasoning for that was it was easier to manufacture that way, to have that area there and then transition to the rounded spine. Doesn't make a ton of sense to me because they already do it on the Sebenza, so why not do it on the Inkosi? I think the Sebenza looks cleaner in that regard. The positioning of the pocket clip is a bit different as well. If we flip these guys over, the pocket clip on the Sebenza goes straight down the lock bar, and the Inkosi kind of cants a little bit to the side and actually rests on the frame instead of on the lock bar. What that does is it doesn't put as much tension on the lock bar, so it's a little bit easier to disengage the lock. But it also eliminates any hot spot in hand. So actually, this is BJ Hill's Sebenza. Thank you, BJ, for lending me this for the past week and a half or so to test out. The pocket clip on the Sebenza digs right into my hand and creates a really bad hot spot, whereas on the Inkosi, just that little bit of an angle, it just disappears. You don't even feel it when you're gripping it. One other thing that they differ on, let's flip them back around here. The Sebenza has that little hole in the handle scale that a lot of people dislike. That's a hole when they're machining. It's something that's like a reference for them it sits on a plate, I think, and it's just a reference point for them when they're machining to make sure everything fits correctly. On the Inkosi, it's all just one flat plain handle, which I like the look of a little bit more. The way the lanyards are attached are a little bit different as well. The Sebenza has your traditional lanyard pin that the lanyard runs straight through, and you can tie a lanyard to that. The Inkosi is a bit different. It's actually part of the standoff. So it's integrated into the standoff, and the lanyard just wraps right around. There's also something a little bit different on the back of the knives. As you see right here, it's all one same width all the way throughout here, no extra milling. But if you look on the Inkosi, there's this little milled spot right here that is actually for, I believe it's for the lanyard to sit so the lanyard can rotate properly, which is actually a really cool little touch. I think it looks pretty good, and that's just, they're thinking ahead to where that otherwise that lanyard would be sticking out at like a 45-degree angle up there. That's huge. I can't believe that they thought of that. The other main difference on the outside of the knives is the difference in the grind. So they're both a hollow grind. The camera's probably not going to be able to pick this up, but the Sebenza is a large hollow grind, so it's a much deeper hollow grind, whereas the Inkosi is a smaller radius hollow grind. It's still hollow. It's still relatively thin behind the edge. This is the factory edge. It was about 24 to 25 thousandths behind the edge. So it's relatively thin for being a big knife, but there's a lot more material there. It's just it'll thicken up a little bit quicker than the Sebenza will. So with that being said, let's take these guys apart. You guys can see a lot of the main differences inside the knives, and then we'll put them back together. Okay, guys, so here we are, completely disassembled. I know everything's kind of all over the place. I'll pick things up and put them in front of the camera so you guys can see it. First thing is the differences are the washer size and shape. So on the Sebenza, you have two different washers. You have a big one and a small one. Both are perforated, just in different orientations. But a big one goes on one side, small one goes on the other. Whereas on the Inkosi, you have two washers. They're the exact same size. And here's the interesting part. Doesn't matter what side either one of these go on, and it's going to be kind of hard with the lock bar here, but one of these washers, or the washers, fit right up against the stop pin, so the washers themselves can't rotate, which is actually very, very cool. On top of them being as big as they are and the ginormous perforations that they have to carry lubrication all the way throughout, the only thing that I'm not completely sold on is the Sebenza washers pick up a lot of dirt over time, and I have a feeling that the perforations in the Inkosi washers are going to do the same. The next difference is the pivot's a little bit different in these. So the Sebenza has a bushing pivot. So basically the way that it works, here's the blade, here's your little bushing that sits right up inside of here, and then you have your male and your female screw that run through either side of this, and that's pretty much it. The Inkosi is a little bit different. You have no bushing pivot. It's just the male and female screw. And look at the size of the pivot on this thing. And look at the width of the screw. I mean, that is just unreal. That is huge. I gotta say, mine was covered in Loctite. This is the first time I've disassembled it. But that is massive compared to the Sebenza pivot. And the only other difference internally is the actual lock face themselves. So on the Sebenza, you have a normal titanium lock bar with your detent ball there, and it looks like the lock face is treated so it's hard and you don't get any lock stick, which is good. The Inkosi is a little bit different. The Inkosi, you have this ginormous 97 Rockwell ceramic ball, and that's actually what interacts with the blade tang, and that's also your detent ball. So if you look on the blade of the Inkosi here, you have this giant detent hole, and you guys might be able to see on the lock face, it's so hard to tell, you might be able to see that little wear pattern that's going on. That is actually right where that ceramic ball actually locks up. So that's actually what gives you your lockup, which is super cool. It's harder than the blade steel, so it should wear slower actually than your titanium lock bar on the Sebenza. In many ways, I think this is an upgraded Sebenza, but each have their own pluses and minuses. And also right here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 total parts for the Inkosi that needs to be taken off to take it apart. The Sebenza, you have to take the entire thing apart, and that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 total parts, including the handles and the blade. So, I mean, the Inkosi is a more simple design, and it has more technology packed into it. The Sebenza is more classic, though, and that's, I think, a lot of people gravitate towards that, and I think more people need to check out the Inkosi because I say it's just as good, it's just different in its own right. If I had to pick one between the two, I'd have to agree with Banner 24/7, and I'd have to say my favorite is